Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to Sound Vision's fundraising training series. Today is our third sustainable fundraising training titled Creating or Crafting Winning Messages, Communicating with Donors During Uncertain Times. Sound Vision has been bringing leading quality content for almost 3 decades to the North American Muslims and has now become a pioneer in professional development trainings. As we approach Ramadan, most of our mosques and nonprofit organizations are struggling to find ways to fundraise. Sound Vision's team has been working long hours to adapt all our trainings to an online portal and bring you professional trainers to help everyone learn and adapt. I am Nargis Naqvi, your moderator for this webinar. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank the generous donation of our donor WIT, which is an IT solutions company with offices in Michigan, Ohio, and Toronto. Before I introduce our presenter, I would like to point out a few housekeeping rules so we can have a streamlined experience, inshallah. At all times during the meeting, please keep yourselves on mute so we can have an uninterrupted session. When you do have a question, please use the chat box. There should be some little links there that have an option to raise your hand. If not, click on any of those options so that I know that you have a question, and then I can unmute you and you can ask your question. And also you can type it in the chat box and we can definitely unmute you at that time as well. Now I'd like to introduce our trainer, Emily Dontsos. Emily is a freelance writer, editor, and consultant specializing in nonprofit communications. She has worked in the charitable sector as a communications specialist for over a decade. Before launching her freelance career in early March, Emily was manager of strategic communications at Women's College Hospital Foundation in Toronto. Prior to that, she held senior communications roles at Children's Aid Foundation of Canada and the Royal Conservatory of Music. Her current roster of clients includes Kids Help Phone, Centennial College, Children's Aid Foundation of Canada, Michael Garron Hospital Foundation, Women's College Hospital Foundation, and a lot more. Emily holds an MA in English Literature from the University of Toronto, an honors BA in English Literature from McMaster University, and a journalism diploma from the London School of Journalism. She's also currently working towards an editing certificate from Simon Fraser University. Without further ado, I'd like to ask Emily to start her presentation.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And welcome, everybody. It's great to see so many. I can't see all of your faces, but I can see that there are lots of people on the call, so that's great. Thank you very much. I'm excited to chat with you all today, and hopefully I can help you learn a little something, and hopefully we can have lots of great discussions. So I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully this works. I'm going to go into my presentations. That's me. Nargis, is it working from your end? It is. Okay, perfect.
Yes, it is. Sorry.
It is. Okay, great. So I just want to, before I launch into that, I just want to quickly say, so I have, we won't be doing a breakout session for my presentation, but because there's a lot to get through, a lot I want to talk to you about today. But I do want to really encourage questions and conversations. So every few slides, I'll stop and ask if anyone has any questions. I'll try to get you engaged in some conversation throughout, but then we will have lots of time for questions and discussion at the end as well. So there'll be lots of time to ask your questions. And I did thank you for those of you who filled out the survey that I sent out earlier this week. That was great. So I have incorporated a number of your specific questions from that into this presentation. So let's get started. Hopefully, I just want to double check again. Nargis, it's still working? Everything's
great.
Okay, perfect. This is all new to me as well. So just to get started, I just want to first acknowledge right off the top, we are very much living in unprecedented times. I think in most of our lifetimes, we've never experienced anything like this. We'll never experience anything like this again. It's a crisis in all kinds of different ways, but it is absolutely a communications crisis, especially for nonprofits right now. So we are in a very unique situation. I know lots of people on the call are from nonprofits. You may be an imam running a mosque, all kinds of different situations. But for community-based organizations like ones that you all represent. We are in a unique situation here. I just want to share this quote from Brad Ross. He's the current head of communications for the city of Toronto, and he's one of our country's, one of Canada's, one of the best communicators really in North America. He used to be the head of communications for the TTC as well. So he wrote an article just the other day for a PR magazine, and he said, just this quote here, that COVID-19 is immune to proven crisis communications management, illness, death, and unprecedented disruption, is without question a crisis desperately in need of a solution. This isn't crisis communications, it's a communications crisis. So it's just acknowledging off the top, there is no blueprint for what we're going through right now, but there are some best practices, some tips and tricks and things we can keep in mind as we try to communicate with our donors during these very challenging times. And this applies to communicating across all sectors, but particularly in the charitable sector, because we face some unique challenges. So just want to share a few examples. As this all started to happen, I'm sure all of you started to receive communications from the different charities you might support, just with a whole range of different, you can sort of see the pivoting happening right in front of us as we're sort of watching these communications come in. Charities and the ones that I work for and have worked for are, it just threw our communications planning, careful communications planning out the window. You just put everything aside and say, all of a sudden this sort of shocking change in our lives. How can I communicate now? What do we do? Where do we go from here? So, some of these very unique messages that we wouldn't typically see in normal times, talking about the world being upside down, or launching specific COVID-19 appeals, or, distancing ourselves, we're coming together. So this is sort of what we're dealing with. It's an interesting and unique time, but I like a good challenge. So hopefully you all do too. So in terms of our agenda for today, I'm going to first, before we understand how to pivot our communications in a time of crisis like we're in now, we need to first understand the basics of donor communication. So I'm going to run through some best practices in donor communications. And then we'll talk about fundraising communications in the time of COVID-19. Like I said earlier, I will address some of your key concerns that were laid out in the survey results. So things like, how do I ask donors for support when everyone's worried about their finances right now? How do I go back to the same donors and ask for more support? How do I execute a digital campaign? Because that's all we have. So I will be addressing those, but like I said, if at any point you have questions, please cut in, interrupt me, and I will stop and ask if you have any questions as well. So again, we'll talk about executing digital campaigns, a few other fundraising ideas for these fun times we're in, and then I'll just summarize, and I will, I believe you'll be receiving a recording of this afterwards, so my slides will be available to you. It's a lot of information contained in them, so hopefully that'll be helpful, and then time for questions. So in terms of, and before I get started, does anybody have any questions right off the top? Anybody? Okay. So I'll just keep launching right in. So donor communications in normal times, a few guiding principles. So I like to always say, before you do anything when it comes to communicating or writing, just take a moment to really understand the impact of giving, what it means to somebody to donate. So I'll talk about that. This is just a little agenda of what I'll be speaking about in terms of the basics of donor communications. The second one is understanding the psychology of giving. So there are certain words and phrases we can use that really get to the heart of what will inspire somebody to give. So we'll talk about that. Appealing to your donors' emotions and their humanity. This to me is absolutely key. So using stories rather than statistics. And I'll share a few examples of some amazing storytelling in donor communications that I've seen come out from different nonprofits. Demonstrating impact is huge, and be specific. So when I was working at Women's College Hospital Foundation, I'll talk about that later, but we went from very general sort of statements of impact to being very, very specific. And we saw a huge uptick in donations and in engagement. So we'll speak a little bit about that, what that means. And the final one is to show gratitude. Just let people know, acknowledge that the importance of acknowledging and expressing your thanks for, people giving those dollars where it may hurt a little bit to give. So making sure people feel that they are having an impact, and that's what will inspire them to give again. So that's what I'll cover here. So let's just get into it. So understanding the impact of giving. So just to acknowledge that, many people I found a really interesting statistic, and I know a lot of you on the call are from the States as well and from different parts of Canada. But I just found a sort of Toronto-based statistic that I believe is reflective of the general context across North America. A lot of people give even when it hurts them to give. There's the statistic is that people who make below 50,000 tend to donate a greater percentage of their gross salary compared to those who make above 100,000. And that's it for a lot of people, it can be difficult to give financially, but they care so deeply about the causes they're supporting that they want to give and support. So that's a pretty powerful thing. I remember at my previous role, there was a gentleman who came in at great difficulty. Oops, do I have a, oops, sorry, there's a little check. Sorry, I've messed this up. Let me just go back. There we go. Came in at great difficulty into the hospital. He had a registered check for $200 that had meant the world to him, but he had read a story about the hospital's refugee clinic, and he desperately wanted to support it. He didn't have the money to do so, but he went to the bank, got a registered check. He felt it was an enormous amount of money and brought it all the way into the hospital, and that just because of his belief in that cause. So, why do people give? They give because there's some more statistics from some major studies. 91% give out of a sense of compassion because they believe in the cause, because they want to contribute to their community. So it's just keeping in mind these things, the motivations that donors have when they do give, and understanding that. And it's not just about money, it's about helping somebody make a connection to something they believe in, whether that's, the critical importance of their mosque in their lives and to their faith, or whether it's, they care about cat rescue. It's something that they desperately believe in and they want to support. And then just understanding that community support is what keeps the lights on. Donors are at the heart of our organizations. Without them, we would not be able to do the work that we do. Does anyone have any questions before I go on? Okay. So I just want to, just setting it within the example, I know many of you represent Muslim-based nonprofits or mosques, so just within your context, some ideas as to why, just thinking about why your donors give. The mosque is the focal point of their faith identity, their community. They care deeply about the well-being of their mosque. A lot of people, giving is a major way to play an active role in caring, in the act of caring for something that is important to them. And a lot of people want to inspire others to step forward as well. I know that in the Muslim community, Nargis and I were just speaking about not, anonymous giving, the importance of anonymous giving in the Muslim community. So not wanting or requiring that level of recognition that a lot of non-Muslim donors may really want. So whether or not somebody is acknowledged publicly for their giving, maybe it's within their circle of family or friends saying, I've chosen to support my mosque in this way. Would you consider doing the same? So it's inspiring others to give as well. It's just keeping those things in mind. Moving on to the next point in the basics of donor communication. So we've talked about why people give, and just keeping that always in the back of your mind when you are working on your communications. So now some specifics in donor communications. So there is a psychology to donor communications. We talk about the power of you, using the word you, and that makes your communications very personal. It makes the donor feel that you are speaking to them, that you understand that they are there, they want to help. So instead of using phrases like the mosque runs a series of workshops that's funded by donors, that sort of creates a disconnect between those individuals and your organization. So consider saying things like, your support makes it possible for the mosque to deliver a series of workshops. That makes people feel a much more direct connection to the impact of their support. So other examples, your generosity helps to build a thriving community. Your donation, it's just wherever you can use the word you, what you make possible. And you'll see this in a lot of the examples that I'm going to share. Let's see here. So there are other types of, I'm calling them magic words, and these are proven to really make an impact in, when you use them throughout your communications. You want people to feel that, and sometimes it can feel a little bit silly to use these words a lot, and you kind of think, people should understand that we need their support to deliver our programs. Why should I have to sort of put all these words into here? But they really do make an impact. They really do help to connect people to your cause. And they help people to see themselves in a certain way. People want to be seen as, they want to be acknowledged for their generosity, for their compassion. They want to see themselves as, you know, a generous person who's caring, and those are the types of people that give to charity. This sort of helps to, these words sort of solidify that for them. So in your communications, using words like your generous support, your compassionate leadership in choosing to support an organization, it just makes people feel good. And these words have been proven, these ones in particular that I've listed here, when you use them wherever possible to create deepen engagement with your cause.
So Emily, there's a question here.
Oh, great.
What if they aren't donating to their own community, but somewhere else really far away? So she's saying we are an advocacy organization that does anti-genocide work and advocates for minorities, which are very vulnerable. And they're not necessarily in North America, they're abroad. So
yes, that's a great question. That's a great question. So thank you for asking that. So so in that case, I still think a lot of this applies. So it's not necessarily, so I guess the examples I was using were specific to, like, you know, if you're in a mosque community or you're working in your local community, but many organizations support international causes, international development, humanitarian causes. So in that case, a lot of this still applies. It's saying, you know, you are a compassionate person, you care about the well-being of vulnerable populations. You know, your generosity, it's still using those same principles. Your generosity will change and save lives of people, you know, not only in North America, but around the world, some of the world's most vulnerable people. So it's really being specific, and I'll get to that sort of about being specific about the impact. And I can use sort of those more international examples when we get to that part. But that's a great question. I do think it's still, I mean, I know it very much still applies. It's really then in that case thinking about, so why do your donors give to international charities, international humanitarian causes? In that case, it's because they do feel a deep sense of empathy for the well-being of our world's most vulnerable people. And that's an incredible thing. So it's thinking about that and saying, you are the type of person, you're a compassionate, generous person, even though this won't impact your local community, you're changing the lives of people around the world. So I think it still applies. It's just taking it then to that context of what they're supporting. Margis, I'm seeing like chat boxes pop up. Should I be looking at those, or are you sort of
looking at them? Don't worry about that.
Perfect.
Hannah, is your question answered, or did you want to ask anything else? I can unmute you, or you can unmute yourself.
No, thank you so much for that. Yes, I'll wait for the specifics later, and then perhaps circle around.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to make a note to myself because I have specific examples in mind of, there's a nonprofit in particular. I'm thinking of one that I actually do work for, a client of mine that works in Southern Africa with a very vulnerable population there. And that's exactly the type of language that we're using. So I can speak, I'll make a note to myself to speak about that a little bit down, but yeah, I'm glad I could help with that for sure.
Hi, Emily.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Good, thank you. Emily, sometimes I see that participants send private text messages to you too. If you can, like the chat box, you may have, yeah, they may directly send you if they can't ask in the group.
Okay, I feel like last time I clicked it, it sort of moved my slides along, but I don't see it now, but next time it comes up.
Sure, perfect.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I would request everybody to send it to me if you have a question. I don't want Emily to get distracted. I will ask it on your behalf, and then you can also unmute yourself if it's a little bit of a detailed question.
Perfect, that sounds great. Thank you. Are there any more questions before I move on?
Hi, Emily. I do have a question here. So I know that the purpose of this conversation is to help within the Muslim community, but the organization that I volunteer with, we are trying to reach out to other faith groups as well. So if you can shed some light on how we can cross faith in terms of reaching out to other communities. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, that's great. So can you tell me a little bit more actually about the work that you're doing? So what are like the programs or services? Is it to
yeah, sure. I could tell you what we're doing. So the organization that I volunteer with is called Beneficent, and we're working towards fighting high interest rates. So we're helping people get out of high interest-bearing debt by issuing interest-free loans, which I understand that having no interest-free is present in also other faiths as well. But ultimately, this is for all Canadians with or without a faith. But because there's a strong understanding in the Muslim faith to not take on interest. It drives really well within the Muslim community, but we do get clients that are not Muslim, and it's really because I guess they've just been very brave to look beyond and their imagination of beyond interest. But we do struggle getting to other faith groups because we don't want to just have this service to Muslims, but to everybody.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's a great example, and that's a unique sort of challenge. But in that case, I would say if it were me thinking of how to communicate to different faith groups, I would say, you know, you believe in, you know, the importance of faith in your life and in your community. You know, we live in such a diverse. I don't know if you're in. Sorry, oh, you are in Canada. Is that right?
Yes, we're based off in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about whether it actually applies to, you know, Canada and the US, we have such diverse communities. It's, you know, the strengthening, I would talk about strengthening the diversity of our communities and bringing our different faith groups together based on shared values, emphasizing shared values, emphasizing that everyone as part of different faith groups believes in the importance of their community and shares a similar outlook and wants to support their individual organizations, but also we can create a stronger community and society by supporting one another as one community as well. So it's sort of emphasizing those messages of this like strength and diversity, shared values. I think, you know, those are pretty powerful. In that case, it's really getting to the heart of, and really across all communications, it's getting to the heart of what somebody's value base is. So I'm not talking about faith values. I mean, their values in terms of the role that faith does play in their lives, the role that community plays in their lives. And hopefully they, you know, I can imagine in that situation you run into, I guess you
Emily, you muted yourself.
Oh, I muted myself. Oh my gosh.
Oh, you're okay now.
Amazing.
I just
We
wanted
can hear
to
you
let
now.
everybody know that if you can just type in your questions, that way Emily can continue talking, and when it's jump in, I'll jump in. Just
Am I still on mute?
No, you're not.
I can
Oh,
hear
I'm
you.
good. Okay, sorry. Oops. Oh gosh, sorry.
I can control your mute and unmute, so don't worry about it. I'll unmute you if you get.
Okay, great. Okay, perfect. I don't know how that happened. That's so weird. Does that help a little bit though with the sort of interfaith question?
Yes, Emily, that was very helpful. Perhaps we can talk about this more offline, but I do appreciate your input. Thank you.
That was great. And actually, yeah, and just a quick note on that, I actually do work with, one of my clients is actually a woman who volunteers with an organization that works with Muslim, Christian, and Jewish women to sort of bring those faiths together. So I have some connections I could help you make as well. And she can, so anyways, let's talk offline. I'm going to write down.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. Appreciate
Thank you. That's great. Okay, so I'll just keep going through because, oh my gosh, I have a lot to go through. I hope I'm not boring you guys. So I want to quickly move on to storytelling. So really at the heart of donor communications and the heart of really inspiring people to give is stories. So you want to, thinking about people donate when they feel empathy. We've talked about empathy, compassion. They donate when they feel an emotional connection to your work. So we know that from various studies of why donors give, we know that stories are much more powerful than any statistic you could ever share. And I have a few examples of this. So, you know, triggering empathy, it's through the power of storytelling. So I just wanted to, so before I go into, so I have a couple of quick videos, they're just a minute long each, 2 of them, that I want to show you. I'm sure that lots of you have seen videos from Sick Kids. Sick Kids Foundation is probably the gold standard for the power of storytelling in the nonprofit industry. And this is something that most of us will never be able to achieve. We don't have the budget, we don't have the team strength to do this, but it just shows you how powerful storytelling can be. So I'm just going to play a video for you. Hopefully it works. Okay, could everyone see that?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So that was just an incredible example of, they didn't share a single statistic. They didn't even really use any words. It just sort of shows you the possibilities of storytelling. It's such a powerful video. Fundraising for Mother's Day. Sick Kids is Canada's leading children's hospital. They serve many, many thousands of young people every year. But they didn't give a single statistic. It was just about the sort of strength of these mothers, the sick kids' mothers, and how can you sort of support those journeys through your giving, and you sort of feel compelled to give, like, I need to support this. It's very human and ignites a lot of empathy. So I just want to show one more example of this. This is from United Way, and this is a slightly different, also a video, and I just also want to emphasize that storytelling does not have to take the form of videos. It can be it's most often in writing, it's videos, it's photographs, it's, it can just be a phrase, but I just want to show you sort of the possibilities of it through these examples. So this is a video from United Way that shares the specific story of one individual. And again, United Way supports over 6,000 different programs across Canada. So United Way Canada serving many thousands, millions of people every year, but this is just one story. And actually, it's an interview between a service user and a donor. So it's also a very creative way of storytelling. So I'll just play this video as well.
Growing up, I just felt this hatred for myself. There wasn't a lot of Indigenous families. I saw myself as an outsider. And it was just hard to, get up every day to, get ready, because I didn't want people to see my face. I dropped out of school and I sort of stopped planning for the future because I didn't think I had one. And I felt like nobody was there for me when I needed them. At that point, I just thought I was alone. But then I finally found a program that I connected with, and I felt like I belonged there. It was definitely a place where I felt at home. I got to know myself and to feel confident.
As Indigenous people, we have not been given the power to be who we were originally meant to be. And that's one of the beauties about this organization. And to see that your life is shining, that encourages me to realize the benefit of generosity. Giving next year is going to be even easier.
Some days I just think I'm actually here. Without United Way and the generosity of the whole organization, I don't even really know where I'd be. It has given me a future. It's just the greatest thing that's ever happened to me.
Okay, so that was another example, really powerful example of just the possibility of sharing one story. It's very emotional. It really connects you. It helps you to understand what United Way is doing without having to run through a series of statistics. You sort of get a sense of the human impact of their work through one person's story. So takeaway from that is that one story is always more powerful than any number of statistics you can provide, and will help to demonstrate the work that you're doing.
And we do have a question. How do we do this in a post-COVID world?
So I will definitely get to that. So yeah, so absolutely getting to that when we talk about COVID communication. So I will bring the sort of storytelling, and we're sort of so actually this example I have in front of me is a sort of example of storytelling in a COVID world. So I'll just speak about this, and then we will get to COVID related fundraising communications momentarily. So this example actually on that question that you're seeing in front of you. So this is an example of a COVID-related communication that also brings in storytelling from an organization, Kids Help Phone, which is one of my clients that I didn't do this work, but this is something that they put out recently. They have an interesting challenge with storytelling because they are an anonymous, confidential service. So they sometimes are able to acquire quotes from young people who have used their service, but mostly they never have contact with them again. It's an anonymous, confidential phone line. So they have to be creative about their storytelling. So Kids Help Phone, with the onset of COVID-19, they have experienced almost 400% increase in demand for their services. There's a huge mental health crisis happening out there with adults and kids alike. And so they've been asking for a huge amount of support, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But so they have been doing this social media campaign. It's young kids writing to other kids saying, I know, so this example, I know that you're worried about the virus, it's going to be okay, but if you're worried, you can contact Kids Help Phone. So this sort of helps to humanize what they're doing. It helps to sort of connect kids with kids, and you see the child's handwriting. It's just a way to create that emotional connection when it can be difficult to do so. So this is a COVID communication, but I will get to more specific about how do we communicate in the time of COVID-19 momentarily after we talk about these sort of basics. So just to wrap up on stories, so stories engage the brain, they activate empathy, they deepen understanding, they promote better recall. So this is one of the main takeaways I want you to take from this, is that emotions drive donors' decisions. And this applies very much to mosques and Muslim-related nonprofits, because when you're with a religious institution, they've shown that, I know that there have been studies showing that the power of prayer lights up parts of the brain that are deeply associated with empathy and and compassion, and it's really fascinating. So these are activate similar areas of the brain, these things that mean so much to you, that you connect so deeply with, rather than rational thought of, why do I attend the mosque? It's what does the mosque mean to you? And this applies to every type of cause. So I want to encourage you to find those stories in your community. And I was wondering, I was going to do a breakout session originally, but I decided not to because we have a lot to cover. But I do want to stop here and ask, does anybody have any stories? So this would be like, say if you are fundraising for a mosque, have you had a member of your congregation come up to you and speak about the impact of attending mosque or a specific program within your mosque on their life? Have you had somebody contact you, whether it's a donor or a community member of your nonprofit, and say, this made a huge impact on me? Does anyone want to share any examples? And no pressure, but if anyone wants to share an example of those types of stories, I'd love to hear it now if you'd like.
I can share a story.
Yeah.
So one of our largest campaigns is the Burma Task Force, and we work with Rohingya refugees. So about 2 years ago, we at a rally, I met one of the only Rohingya refugees that lives in the DC area, and he came with us to Advocacy Day on Capitol Hill. We trained him how to speak, how to advocate for his own cause, and that focus, like just the transformation in his ability to speak for his own self and for his own people. And I started like connecting on Facebook, and I'd see like, oh my God, like I see all these other organizations raising funds for the Rohingya people, but this is the only organization that lets me speak for myself, and I feel so empowered. And then eventually he became a staff member. He's a part-time staff member with us. So yes, his story is really powerful to me.
And do you ever use that story in your communication?
Some privately, yes, but I fear exploiting him in some way, and I'm sure he would we might need to convince our group that maybe we should use, because he's willing and able, like he's like a big supporter, just even if he wasn't working for us. So yeah, so that's the story.
That's actually a big point that I haven't included in my slides that I actually want to talk about right now, is privacy and exploitation, because this is huge and a lot of people are concerned about this. So thank you. First of all, that's an incredible story. Oh my gosh, that's an amazing one that could be leveraged. And I just want to say, so definitely there are concerns from a lot of organizations about exploiting stories, using them to fundraise. But I think what it comes down to is, first of all, I think when you find stories like that in your community, that's an incredible example, is, approaching that person and explaining to them, this is such a powerful experience. It really demonstrates the power of the work that we're doing, and, your context and your circumstances, and on behalf of your community, would you be willing to share your story? And a lot of people, if they're not comfortable, they will absolutely say so. I always like to say to people that I'm approaching for a story, like, please don't feel any pressure. Just wondered, and it can be anonymous, or we can just use your first name. We don't have to use photos. We don't have to use video. It can just be an anonymous written story. That's a great way to protect someone's privacy. Lots of people, though, are very happy to put themselves out there because they think it sort of inspires others to step forward with their stories. They feel strongly about the ability of their story to inspire donations. So I would say that every situation is different. Treat every story differently in terms of, does that person want to be anonymous? Do they want to put their name, their full name, their picture out there? Have a consent form. That's really important too. A consent form where they tick off exactly what they're most comfortable with, and they sign it. Make sure that you have all of that in writing, and just let them know that they can change that or pull out of it at any time. So it's really working closely with what we call those ambassadors, those storytellers, to make sure they're always comfortable. They never feel exploited. Your organization is never seen as exploiting them. A great example actually is Sick Kids Foundation. So they use every story that they use, those people are real mothers, real children. Some people do think like, oh, are they exploiting the kids? But from everything I've heard is that the kids, first of all, they would never do it without full consent from the kids and their parents, but the kids absolutely love it. These are sick children, but they love being part of being able to share their stories with the community, the feedback that they get. It's very empowering for a lot of people to share their stories. So I think keep that in mind too. I've worked with a lot of people that sharing their stories like that has become sort of part of their healing journey, depending on what it is that they've been through. So it can be a very empowering experience. So I wouldn't hesitate to ask. All you can do is ask if that person wants to share, and in whatever way they're comfortable. So thank you for sharing that. That's a great example. Okay, let's keep moving forward. So I'm cognizant of our time. So on the point of, and I will get to COVID, I promise. This is just more on just basics of donor communications. So I'll move a bit quickly through these. So demonstrating impact. So this is really important. Donors like to know exactly what the impact of their gift will be. So be very specific. Are there programs or services that need support? Is it a specific, reading program for kids ages 5 to 10? Is it, and share stories, or even if it's just a quote, an anonymous quote from a service user, wherever possible, be specific. If you're requesting general operational funding, whether it's for your mosque or for your organization, just to, find those examples of specific things that it'll fund. So yes, it'll help to keep the lights on, or, keep the operation running, but what is it that you do within your organization or your mosque that brings such value to people? So try to be specific wherever possible. I find when I was at Women's College Hospital Foundation, when I first started, like I said earlier, we were doing very general sort of, your gift will change the lives of women or improve women's health. But once we started saying, you're supporting our Bay Center for Birth Control, you're supporting Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence Care Center, and here are some stories from there. And the engagement levels went way up, donations went up. So it's very powerful. People want specifics. And then, like I said earlier, sort of above all else, express gratitude in whatever way this is. I know that it'll look different depending on different communities. So within the Muslim community, it may not be public recognition, but it might be an email just saying thank you. It's, instead of thinking of gratitude as sort of a nice to have, it's making sure that you're always expressing thank you. Like I know that this donation may have been difficult for you, especially these days, and we'll talk about that. Asking for donations at a time when everyone's worried about their finances. But the point is, don't let a communication opportunity pass by without thanking your donors. So let them know you value them. You are grateful for those donations. Those donations are making a difference. It's part of the overall cycle of making sure that they will donate again and continue to be engaged. So this is just an example of what a typical ask would look like, not in the time of COVID-19, but bringing it all together in normal times. So, a brief sort of written ask: your generosity will make it possible for our mosque to deliver, specific 5 workshops. This is only possible with your support, and thank you so much. So again, you'll have the slides after, so you can sort of review this, but this is like a typical best practice communication for asking for donations. So let's move on though and before I move on to COVID-19, do we have any other questions at all that anyone wants to ask? I think everyone probably just wants to get onto COVID-19. So
I think Maury has a question related to this.
Oh, no, sorry, I don't have a question. I put thumbs up like we're good. I'm good.
oh, good. Excellent. Great.
Hi, this is Amaya. I just wanna highlight something you mentioned, Emily, about because some of the people like in the community are vulnerable usually who are receiving like the service, and sometimes like they can't understand the implication if we were like to use their story, right? Sometimes they don't understand the implications upfront, right?
Yeah.
As much as we can, especially if they're like new immigrants or they're vulnerable, they have a lot on their minds, and so there is like a little bit of a risk, and we have to do our homework, I guess, before we like use their story or how much of their story, their identity we review.
That's such a good point. Yeah. So in that case, I think there is probably a little bit of, so I would say, first of all, if you know, if someone is from a very sort of unique situation where they really wouldn't have any context for this type of communication, you know, they may be from a very, very vulnerable, underdeveloped area of the world, and this is completely foreign to them. I would say just, you know, if you feel like this will take them completely by surprise, they won't get it, you know, maybe just it's, if they say something about their experiences, and you can say to them, would you mind if I used, you know, just quoted you anonymously in some of our communications, you know, and in that case, they hope, you know, if they're okay with that. But if you really feel like it won't be something they would understand, then maybe it's, you know, not the best thing to do. But if there are others that maybe just need a little bit of education about what these communications are, we have an example from my last job. We had a refugee clinic, and lots of refugees from very underdeveloped areas of the world, but we're really excited to thank the hospital and share their stories. And we just did a little bit of education, like, so here are some of the types of communications we do. We do videos, we do written stories, we have newsletters, you know, showing examples. This is what we do. Is this something that you would want to participate in? And a lot of the time, most of the time, they would say, like, absolutely, this is amazing. We definitely had some, though, that wanted to stay anonymous for safety reasons. Some who just were not comfortable because they you know, where they come from, putting yourself out there at all can be a risk to them. It's just not within their sort of scope of experience. So we would just say, okay, no problem. But so it's finding the ones where maybe there is some education to bring them up to speed. They get it, they're happy with it, but always make sure, definitely, like you say, that they understand what it is, where it is their story will be shared. But in the case that they do want to share their story, but they don't quite understand what you're going to use it for, I would say an anonymous quote or story is always the best, safest route to go. Not sharing even first names if there's any concern. So does that answer your question at all?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect, no problem. So we move into fundraising communications in the time of COVID-19. I just wanted to cover, you know, the basics of donor communications, because anything related to COVID-19, you know, it's really just a twist on what the best practices are in normal times. But just saying again, there is no blueprint for communicating in a time like this, but I do have some best practices that, especially ones that I've seen that I've been working on over the last number of weeks with many of my clients. So what's working is just, so I say it up front, be human. So it's all of your communications, but it's be human, acknowledge that we're all in this together. I've been seeing that time and time again. You know, instead of moving away from your organizational voice a little bit, you know, we all have our ways of communicating in our organizational voice, but maybe it's stepping out of that a little bit and just saying, we're having a tough time, we're all in this together, you know, we need your support. And I'll talk about examples of asking for support during these times, but so be human, acknowledge we're in unprecedented times, be honest, you know, the impact. So with Kids Help Phone, I participated in their proposal to the federal government recently. I don't know if anybody heard, they got $7.5 million. They had said to the government, you know, this COVID-19, we've had a 400% increase in demand. We've had a ton of our funding taken away from lack of events, reductions from our major gift donors. We need help. Like, we're at risk. Our operational budget is at risk. We need your help to continue serving Canada's youth. And they got that funding. They've actually had millions more from their private donors because they put a very blunt emergency funding statement out to their closest donors, which I'll speak about in a little bit as well. We're in trouble, we need help, here's why, Canada's kids need us. So they were honest and they were specific. So again, be specific. Let your community know they can help and that you need them. So the good thing about this time is that people are trying to find ways to help. People feel so powerless right now. We're all stuck at home. Our worlds have become so small, so people want to find ways to help. So I'll get to a couple of examples, but just remember the note here, everyone's feeling anxious, uprooted, and fearful. Speak to your community with compassion and honesty and humanity, and that's the key to fundraising communications in this time. We need to be real with each other because we're living in a very real situation. So here's an example again from Kids Help Phone. They're doing some great stuff right now. Again, I didn't work on this. This happened before I started working with them over the last few weeks. But this brings together some of the best practices we talked about earlier in the context of COVID. So their headline, just right off the top, you can ensure no young person feels alone. So this isn't saying Kids Help Phone is reaching kids across the country and donations help us do this. It's you have the ability to ensure no young person feels alone. So Kids Help Phone, just for those of you that don't know, is an anonymous crisis text. It's a phone line, a text line, and a live chat thing for young people up to the age of 25, and it's accessible across the country. So it's for mental health support. And then they talk about, their mission, and we're all facing, so they say here, we're all facing an unprecedented global crisis. So we're in this together. The third arrow down is very specific. We're receiving lots of questions from young people about the coronavirus, what it means for them. So specific. And then the next arrow is we need you to keep the lines open. So, you are needed, you can make a difference. And then I cut it off here, but here's how you can help. So they make some very specific ways of how you can help. So it's make a donation. The other options were sign up to volunteer as a crisis responder. I think those were the two main ones, or like host a virtual event, things like that. So this is a great example of how you can sort of take best practices in donor communications and just twist it a little bit with some of these key elements of honesties, be specific, be human. So that's what really makes the difference. And this is another example from another client of mine, Children's Aid Foundation of Canada. This was a tweet that they did recently. Just, again, it's very specific. So vulnerable youth who have aged out of the child welfare system are in crisis because of the pandemic. It gets into very specific, like what are the needs they're facing: food, safe housing, access to mental health care. They're in trouble, you can help. So those are a few best practices there. So then I took, just before I asked for questions, I just wanted to quickly, so the example I shared earlier of a general donor communication for in the context of a mosque in normal times, and how I would change it in the time of COVID-19. So adjusting for our current context. So I'll just quickly read it. So we would change it from saying we do all these amazing programs, we rely on donor support, to our mosques. So this is, speaking to your congregation. It's the heart of our community and our faith. It's closed to help keep everyone safe during COVID-19. So it's specific. In these difficult times, this is being honest. Our mosque is facing unprecedented financial challenges and an uncertain future. Your support is urgently needed. By donating today, you will help secure the future of our mosque. So just being specific, being honest. People are not afraid to hear, you're in trouble financially. They know why. We're all in this together. So I would just, put it out there, let them know they're needed. They will make a difference. And then at the last line, thank you for your generosity. So always remembering to include that. Does anyone have any questions before I move forward? I have some more specific stuff on COVID communications, but are there any questions on those last few slides?
There's no questions. I did have a comment just because of what I've been seeing. I think a couple of minutes of a recording on a video saying the same thing will have a bigger impact.
Sorry, what was that? A couple of, doing a video. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Like, I don't have a video camera. Nowadays, you could just get on a Zoom call, record yourself.
Yes.
Probably just put that out there, right?
Absolutely. And I'll talk a little bit about that, doing video, and it does not have to be like these sick kids, multi-million-dollar budgets. It can, like you said, Nargis, it can just be a Zoom call. It can just be recording yourself on your laptop, on your phone. So I'll talk a little bit about that towards the end, but that's a great point. So it doesn't have, it can be written, it can be video, it can be a social, social media post, a graphic post. There are many ways to get this message out there for sure.
We do have a question here.
Yep. Perfect.
When you do not have an emotionally appealing cause, how do you connect with empathy in donors? I'm assisting a school, Islamic seminary master's degree programs in fundraising. I'm at a loss on how to tap into emotion. The school's goal is to build the next generation of Muslim ethical leaders in America. I could really use some suggestions and advice.
I think that's so interesting, because I that to me does have such a powerful emotional connection. So in this case, you're tapping into, so I guess it's how you think of emotions. It doesn't have to be, sick children or vulnerable populations. Here we're talking about the power of education, the next generation of leaders. So this is a different type of emotion where people feel that they feel really inspired, that they have an opportunity to support and support the education of people that they want to see rise up in the world and make a difference. So in any educational setting, I think that was right. It's a master's program for Muslim leaders. Is that?
Yeah, it's for
yeah.
master's.
Yeah. So
Islamic seminary.
Yeah. So that's exactly what I would say. So it's people who donate to education have a really strong, I guess emotion is sort of, it may not be the right word, but I do think it is a very strong, that's again a value, a very strong value of the power of education to transform, to prepare people for the future of your faith, so of your faith community. That's a really powerful thing. So it's saying, you believe that in education and in securing the future of our next generation of Muslim leaders, whatever that looks like, you can create a stronger future for our faith, at home and around the world. So it's really tapping into what those values at the heart of your cause are. And I do think, like personally, I love education. I find it very powerful. I just did an article for Centennial about the power of scholarship giving, so supporting the next generation. This program made a huge impact on you. It was specific to alumni. It doesn't have to be to alumni, but this was an article specific to alumni. So it was saying, Centennial College had a huge impact on your life. Now you can help support the next generation. You can help prepare them for the future and help them achieve their greatest potential. And somebody read it and gave $25,000 to scholarships to support Centennial students. So there are ways to really to resonate with the values at the core of who your donors are. Does that make sense? Oh, I think is there another question there?
Probably, but there's another question. What are the key ways to communicate without sounding desperate? And yes, she's saying it did answer her question.
Oh, great. Okay, perfect. So without sounding desperate. So why don't I have, let me just quickly look ahead. So I think, okay, so I'm just looking ahead to my other slides. So without sounding desperate, is that person able to clarify, are you talking about in the time of COVID-19 or in general?
It says here, we've been advised to avoid sounding desperate. How do we balance sharing concerns with honesty without sounding desperate or urgently in need of donations?
So that's a really interesting question. I think it's, and maybe this is not what you want to hear, but I think it's okay to sound a little bit desperate right now. Honestly, everybody is desperate. And we don't want it to sound like, you don't want to sound like you're begging for donations. Absolutely not. But you want people to know that you're facing a very real situation, a very real, unprecedented situation. A lot of charities have been launching, a lot of major charities have been launching emergency funds. So it's, we are suddenly facing an unexpected, unprecedented situation where we urgently need, like, I think you do need to create some urgency to it so that people understand this pandemic is just, oh, you're just floating through, it's not impacting you in a big way. It is, and we all know that it is. So again, it's being honest. It's saying, I think what has been working for a lot of charities is launching a specific emergency fund. So it is the word emergency, which indicates crisis and urgency. It's saying, but we've created a special fund you can donate here to help support the greatest needs of our organization while we respond to what's happening. So I think when you say it'll help to secure our future, people understand what that means. That's a really important phrase. It's, we're facing financial pressures, unanticipated financial pressures because of the impact of this pandemic. I think it's okay to sound like, to reflect what the reality is without, I'm sure that in your organizations, everyone's freaking out a little bit. You don't want to be freaking out in your communications, but you want to say in just, calm, measured way, this has happened to us. We're facing a major financial situation that we did not anticipate. We urgently need your help to ensure that we're able to continue delivering our programs and services. Does that make sense or sound like something that would be realistic in your communications?
Emily, if I may join quickly, it's because there's a difference between sounding desperate, as you mentioned, as the question I asked, and then connecting them back to what your services are.
Yeah.
You see, the example with Emily gave with regard to kids' health phone is a great example, where it says that yes, we are desperate. Why we are desperate? Because we are desperate. We are concerned about not being able to serve our community. And the example, the mosque example, which Emily gave, also great. Because most of the time we see that we are talking about our mosque is in dire need without connecting them back to what the services are, how people are going to be affected if we don't keep this service alive. So this is, yeah, great, thank you.
That's exactly it. So that's exactly it, Arshad. Thank you. So it's, connecting back to, so it's like, the financial pressures you're facing right now. Yes, that's a huge thing. But because of that, the programs and services are at risk. The very organization, the very mosque is at risk. So it's what is it about in normal times about those programs, services, about the mosque that are so important to people? Why is it so important to continue to deliver those things? So I think it's, making that connection back to, and people will see that your cause is more important than ever before. As soon as something is put at risk, just like, we're all experiencing now, our lives have been put at risk, the context of our lives, all of a sudden you value it more than ever. So people value the causes they care about more than ever. I received a really interesting communication from Toronto Cat Rescue, where I adopted my cat from. And that's an interesting organization because it's, and they sent a COVID related communication because no one's paying attention to cat rescue right now. It's all about healthcare. It's all about, people, mental health, people in need. But so they sent a communication saying our world has been turned upside down. It's hard enough getting support in normal times. This is literally what they said. But right now, like we're so afraid for the well-being of the cats that are in our care. We're, and it was a very, I wouldn't say it was desperate, but it was very raw. And you were like, oh my God, I do care about the cat organization. You need support. Okay, I'll support you. So it's, it's exactly, thank you, Rashad. That's a great point. Does that help with the person who asked the question?
Yeah, she said yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I'll move forward. So getting into sort of, and this is very general, this slide, but I'll get into some more specifics. So where, how, and when, and what to communicate. So different ways you can communicate. Now I'm thinking specifically of, and I know there are lots of different organizations represented, but say your main venue, the mosque, or your events have been taken away all of a sudden. So and this is very basic, but where and how. So email, regular mail, even though it might seem kind of silly, is highly effective for donations, especially if you have an older community, older congregation, older donor base. Regular mail can be highly, highly effective for encouraging donations. So it's a letter stating your case. Maybe there's a send back form or just a link if they want to donate online. Phone, you can do a phone campaign, call up your congregation, just any way that you can think of to communicate with them. Social media campaigns, if you have social media channels, are great. And just, I'll get to more specifics on a digital campaign later and what that looks like. So I'll just quickly cover this. If you haven't already, communicating as soon as possible and as frequently as needed. This could be, once a week. In these times, it's okay to communicate frequently with your community during these times. People expect it. People, and I'll get to this as well, but if they don't know that you're in need, they won't give. If you don't ask, they won't give. That's a key point. And again, just under the what, just thinking again of what are your specific fundraising needs. It's not just securing your financial position, which is huge. It's also what are those programs and services like we just talked about that need support. what do you need money for? Let your community know how they can make a difference. Incorporate stories where possible. So thinking about just, can you ask, are there, like we talked about, service users? Is it a volunteer in your organization? Is it a member of your congregation? Just give some thought to where you might be able to access those stories, and don't be afraid to ask people to share. People, you'll find, often want to share their stories. As soon as they realize sharing their story can make a difference, they're happy to do so the majority of the time. So one of the questions that came up in my survey before this event was, how can I ask for donations when everyone is worried about their finances? So this is such a good question. So and we've talked a little bit about this, but this sort of brings it together. So letting your donors know that your organization is facing unique challenges, let them know you need them now more than ever. Acknowledge again that we are all facing the same challenges. You understand that they're worried, you're worried, but also recognize that people are looking for ways to help. So even if it's $5, if 100 people gave $5, it adds up really quickly. So it's telling people that every dollar counts, every single dollar counts. Whatever they can give, even if it's $1, will make a difference. And I think again, it just comes down to not being afraid, having the confidence to say, I know that this is a difficult time, we're all feeling it, but you can make a huge difference for this cause that you care deeply about, by giving whatever you can. So I think again, just be direct, be human, make people feel that you get what they're going through, because you're going through it too. So that's how I would answer that question. Is the person who asked that question on the webinar? Does that help at all?
He's here.
Okay, that's okay. We'll keep moving forward. There's another question here. So somebody else asked, how can I justify going back to people who've already donated? So I would say to this is a great question. So I would say that existing donors are your loyal customers. So think of them as, they've already shown that they want to invest in your cause. They believe in your cause. They're ready and willing to support it. You just need to let them know that you need them, again, now more than ever. So language, I've used some examples here. As one of our organization's greatest champions, I'm reaching out to you today is to let you know that, again, the messaging we talked about. You're a valued member of our community. You need their support and their leadership during these difficult times. So again, the example of Kids Help Phone I keep coming back to, because they're in a really unique position right now of, we've been hearing about them a lot in the media. They've been doing a tremendous amount of outreach and getting a lot of recognition for their services. But they went back with an emergency appeal to all of their existing donors. And they said, we need you now more than ever. Like, we are at risk. Our kids need you more than ever. And they've raised millions. This is a different example. It's a huge organization, but they've raised millions of dollars just by going back to the people that have already donated to them. So again, it's let them know how valued they are, that they acknowledge their support in the past, and let them know that you need them now again, and then express that gratitude. Does anyone have any questions before I move on from that? I know there's a lot. The next slide is on effective digital campaigns. So does anyone have any questions about what we've just talked about?
No, I think we can move forward. Okay,
perfect. So effective digital campaigns. So this is where it's at right now. Obviously, everything else is canceled. So I tried to be really specific here. So a tried and true structure of a digital campaign, I would say it's multi-channel. So that means, an e-blast. And like Nargis said, it could include a video, doesn't have to, but a video or a photo where possible, or is always really impactful. And in this day and age, people understand that even if it's a video taken on your phone or, whatever that looks like, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can be no budget, makes a difference. So I would say to do a primary e-blast, if you have an email list, whatever your organization is, with your ask, incorporating the elements we talked about. Again, I know Ramadan is coming up, and that's a huge fundraising time. I would say do not miss out on the opportunity to get something out. I would say at the very beginning of Ramadan, or even the week in advance, letting people know, are you gonna, so just to pull myself back a little bit, I would suggest setting so say we're talking about fundraising over Ramadan, I would say to set us, and maybe please correct me if I'm incorrect, I'm not Muslim myself, so I may not understand the nuances of it, but I would say set a specific fundraising goal for a specific thing or program, or if it's just for your organization greatest priority needs. Set a certain timeline. Is it over the course of Ramadan? You're going to raise $10,000. So be specific. Lay that out in your e-blast, the why, the what. Maybe announce a few days to a week in advance that you are going to be launching this campaign. So send out your main e-blast. If you can, not everybody can do this, but have a dedicated donation page that reflects the language in your e-blast, so that it seems consistent. If you can, again, further support with a social media campaign so it all launches together. So social media posts that use that same consistent messaging, use videos or photos where possible, like we talked about. And then if you're able to, segmenting your donors into specific audiences is also really important. Not everyone's able to do this, but do you have older donors who may prefer a phone call or a mailed letter versus younger donors who may prefer a social media campaign? Keeping in mind, though, that older donors and older community members in general are the fastest growing group of online users. So to not shy away from accessing those groups online as well. But can you customize your communications for older or younger audiences based on what you know about their preferences and what the messages they like to hear? So that's sort of how I would structure a digital campaign. E-blast accompanied by social media, accompanied by a dedicated donation page. And I'll talk about GoFundMe if you don't have a donation page or you're not a registered charity. Does anyone have any questions about that before I move forward? No, we're good. Okay. So we'll move forward. So what if I don't have a website that has a donation page? You may not be a registered charity. You might be a really small local. You might not even have a website. So, is there a question that's popped up?
Yes, should I read it too?
Sure.
Okay. So in my area, the donors are very limited and many organizations approach those few donors. Maybe the story that I'm telling him, he has already heard this before. How can we be innovative in making an effective appeal?
So most, I would say definitely a lot of donors, especially those that have high capacity, are approached by numerous charities all the time. So it's how do you make yourself stand out? I would say that's an interesting example because the stories that they may have heard before, I guess it's thinking about how can you want to show what the unique value is of your specific organization. So what's really unique to your organization that nobody else can compete with? Or if it's, maybe, and this is probably wrong, but say it's an example of, somebody who goes between 3 different mosques and all the mosques are very similar, but you want to fundraise for your specific mosque. Do you have a specific type of program or service? Does it reside within a unique community? It's just thinking about what's very unique about your organization. So it doesn't, even if you don't have a story that relates to that, it's just letting them know that the unique impact that you have. And so you might need to give some thought to, I know that healthcare struggles with this a lot because everyone's doing really neat things in healthcare. Everyone's doing amazing research and trying to be really innovative with virtual care. But it's, with women's college, the unique value of women's college was that it had a lot of clinics that were focused on social programs, a social justice lens. So sexual assault, birth control, all these sort of unique programs, and also that it was focused on women in a lens of equity. So that's what made it unique in the landscape of healthcare. So it's just really giving some thought to what's unique about your particular organization, finding stories. I wouldn't be worried about if they've heard the same story before, but trying to find stories that are unique within your community. I guess without more specifics about the type of organization you are, I can't answer it better, but I hope that helps. Does that make sense?
I'm going to wait for him to tell me if that made sense, but there's another question related to this.
Sure.
Does it make sense to have a dedicated donation page on your site or a fundraising platform like GoFundMe or LaunchGood versus the actual website?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I would say, and actually the slide that I have up right now, you'll see that, I guess I'll just backtrack and then I'll answer the question. So if you don't have a website with a donation page or you don't know if you want one, so if you are a registered charity in Canada, you can create a dedicated donation page on Canada Helps, canadahelps.ca, amazing platform. They obviously take a portion of, it's like, I can't remember what the percentages of donations that they take, but it is a really valuable platform. They automatically tax receipt. It's great. If you're not a registered charity, or even if you are, so it's for anyone, you can do, so GoFundMe, Kickstarter, and Indiegogo are sort of the three primary top fundraising websites where anybody can set up a fundraising page. So you could be a charity setting one up, you could be an individual, a community organization, a mosque. I would say it's better to have, honestly, both. So if you have a website and you have the capability to set up a donation page, now it doesn't have to be, I would say that you want to have a donate presence on your website, absolutely, so that people know that it's a need, it's an option. But even if you don't have a back-end platform, like the software on the other end to accept donations, the best thing to do in that case is to create a little form, and you can easily do that in most website design programs, a form where they can fill it if they're interested. Are you interested in making a donation? Have better language than that. Fill out this form and someone will connect with you. So the form goes to whoever can then call that person to accept their donation over the phone or by mail, whatever that looks like. So, but I would say to always have a presence on your website if you possibly can, indicating that donating is a need and how people can help, whether that's just contact us so we can contact you to accept that donation. But in terms of GoFundMe, Kickstarter, and Indiegogo, these are typically better for very specific fundraising needs. So I would set up, for example, GoFundMe is an amazing platform. I would say if you're a mosque, I would set up, an emergency Ramadan appeal, whatever that looks like, under GoFundMe, for, in acknowledging the time of COVID-19, the challenges you're facing. This goes for any organization. If you are a larger organization with the capability to do that on your website, I would set up a specific COVID emergency appeal donation page on your website. Otherwise, if not, I would use one of these three, and they're all great. They all take off a certain percentage of donations, but they provide an amazing service, and I think it's worth it. But in terms of having one of these three as your permanent donation page, that I probably wouldn't do. I'm not actually sure if that's the best practice thing to do. I think they're more for specific projects, but in the States, I believe there are other, and I should have looked into this more. I did try to look it up. There was nothing immediately there of a sort of equivalent to Canada Helps. But I'm sure that there's got to be a similar service where it's for charities. Sorry, that was a little bit convoluted, but these are some different options that you could look into. There are options out there for depending on what your status is. Does that?
Emily?
Yeah.
Emily, there's one of the crowdfunding platform which is very popular among Muslim charities is Launch Good. It is, I believe, it is done based out of either US or Malaysia.
Okay.
Launch Good is it has become very popular among all the Muslim charities, even for the small grassroots funding or large organization to use. And there's another one, I'm trying to remember that name. It's a new one called Taha Funder, TAHAFUNDER. So organizations can go and see that what is the commission they charge. And Launchgood has been very popular because I have used it a couple of times before. But their commission charge is a little bit on the high end. You can just do a bit of comparison and then do it.
That's great. Thank you. That's excellent. For sure, that's a great, especially for Muslim-specific nonprofits. That's really helpful. I didn't know about those too. Thank you. Great.
So Lama did have a question related to that. And I think Imam Rashad, you sort of say that. She was asking which is the best platform and how do you know which have the lowest fees? I mean, I would suggest just researching. That's the only way. If you had another insight into that, Emily.
Yeah, so sort of looking at which ones have the lowest fees. Yeah, so I believe GoFundMe has one of the lowest fees. Canada Helps, I think it's, I'm sorry, I should have looked into this a little bit more. I think it's 10% of donations that come in, but it is really great to have a presence there, even if you have a presence on your donation page. GoFundMe, though, is one of the most, probably the most popular, just in general, for project-based fundraising right now. You don't have to be a registered charity. But yeah, I would sort of look into them. They're all a little bit different, but they're all also essentially the same. It's whichever one you feel most comfortable with, but any of these are great options for sure.
And PayPal versus, I mean, PayPal is also okay on
Oh,
you
sorry, PayPal.
compared to these?
Yeah, so PayPal, and this is getting a little bit out of my expertise in terms of accepting donations. So I think PayPal is fine. Really what it comes down to is the donor comfortable using PayPal. So if you are, you know what, I feel like this is something I have to look into a little bit more. I think PayPal is probably fine. I would say, yeah, you know what, I probably shouldn't share too much because I think this is getting a little bit out of my expertise of what is acceptable. So let me look into that and I can follow up for sure. Urshad, do you have any thoughts on?
I have comment on the PayPal.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, normally there is a software I used before called Nation Builders, and PayPal is a platform connecting Nation Builder with the nation. Yeah, PayPal is just a media to connect Nation Builders where you collect the money, and PayPal is not a platform for collecting donation.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, and I feel like it's possible there could be some, some challenges in terms of legal challenges with tax revenue. I'm not sure how that works. I'll need to look into that in terms of if you're not a registered charity, it's probably fine. It may even be the platform that GoFundMe uses, but if you are a registered charity, you could run into some issues with that. So yeah, thank you for that. So I'll need to look into that a little bit more.
Okay, can I elaborate a little bit about my question?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, so the reason I mentioned PayPal, because we are a registered, we're an Islamic school. So we are registered, we have our PayPal already linked to the website. So that's why I'm trying to compare it to this website. I don't know what features these will have versus PayPal, but like I'm talking about myself, I'm more comfortable using PayPal. I feel more safe, because my information is, not shared and it's more, secure. That's why I was thinking, what do you think about using, PayPal?
That's great. Yeah, thank you. Actually, that really clarifies. So I think the difference is that these platforms.
Yeah.
So I think PayPal is a specific, like a transactional service. So for making that actual transaction. So in that case, I think I would consent. Whereas these websites, GoFundMe and all of that, those are platforms where you can, share your story, and they do have very secure transactional services as well, but they're not in themselves just, PayPal is just a way of making a transaction. So there are likely other secure services through.
So I think the way to go is, if we decided to go with PayPal, is really to create our fundraising website or another platform to share stories and videos and all that, and then add PayPal to it.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, that's absolutely what I would recommend. So having your own website presence, and PayPal would be the mechanism through which people give.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely, no problem.
Just to add, yes, that's an important point, because PayPal is just a service provider, and they process your payments. But whereas what Emily is suggesting is crowdfunding is where you can broadcast your message and get people to donate through that platform. So when you're using crowdfunding platforms, they have their own payment processes. You cannot specify they have to use PayPal to that, because crowdfunding platforms, they have their own privacy regulations. So they may not share donor information or financial information. Only thing is, you have to find out exactly what is their commission rate and how much they get from each donation.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then
thank you.
For tax receiving, yeah. So that's something to look into. I'm sure that there must be some recommendations out there in terms of the specific use of PayPal for registered charities. So yeah. Okay. Thank you, Urshad. That's great. Okay. Are there any other? So in terms of what's coming up next, and we're getting near the end here, but I was just going to share some other ideas for communicating online and a couple of other things. But before I move on, are there any other questions on this specific topic in terms of digital campaigns? Okay.
I like to share something. What we're doing is like we're part like of a mosque, a community. So what we're doing, we're using our connections via WhatsApp. Let's say we have WhatsApp groups, and we're turning it into fundraising to support like specific programs. And what we're using is like a Google Doc where people, but we know each other kind of thing. This is not like open to anybody.
Mhm.
If I want to outreach to my own network, I can, but I will be responsible for collecting, right? Like, or make sure the funds are here, whatever they commit to. So we're having a Google Doc where we put all the information in there, the people who want to donate. And that's how we're like encouraging the community, and we're sharing stories, right? Of how can they help? Because if we don't make our community aware of our own situation and what to expect past this pandemic, they may be like, they may be questioning us, like, why didn't you tell us, right? We need to make them aware, and then leave it up to them, how much engaged they want to be.
Absolutely. That's
But we're
great.
finding that is working, and we're able to raise funds that way too.
That's amazing. Thank you for that example. That's a really innovative way for your particular community, that you've found. So it doesn't have to be one of these typical, a website or all of these sort of big things. It can just be something as simple as, like you say, accessing your community through WhatsApp, through the way you communicate. You're communicating with everybody, and then recording who's interested in donating on Google Doc. And if that's working, and that you can even put out that call to your broader community, and however that works, it's, let us know if you want to donate, and we'll add your name, and then you're just following up with them. So that's absolutely another way.
And you know what, I share with you, like in a few days, like we started this like 3-4 days ago, and I think we already have a commitment for like a few thousands. Just from a simple thing that we thought we just trying it out.
That's fantastic. And that's exactly, I love that example, because that just, goes to show that, everybody's worried about asking for money in these times. Don't be worried about asking for money. People want to help. Doing so, especially for your mosque, for something that's so close to your heart, or if it's, close to your heart, it could be people, vulnerable people on the other side of the world. Everyone is struggling right now. You want to support that thing that you care so much about. People, but like you said, if you don't ask, they won't know that you need that support. So that's a wonderful example. Thank you. That just goes to show people want to help. They're ready to help. They just need to be asked. Thank you. That's great. So yeah, so I'll just move on to the last couple of slides. So in terms of other ideas for communicating online, so I would say, and this may or may not be possible, but maybe this is just something as simple as an email, but a regular communication. So in these times, I'm noticing, so typically the best practice is once or twice a month for an e-newsletter from a charity or an organization. People have been ramping up to once a week or more. Sometimes it's just an email, but just make sure you're always communicating with your community, especially those who have donated, to let them know where you're at, how you're feeling, if you need more support. Keep them up to date. So that's important, just a regular communication of some sort. Facebook advertising, this may not be possible for everyone. You need a little bit of budget for it, but you can have as small or as large of a budget as you want. You can set like $100 budget, and it'll only get out there as, for that particular cost. So, and you can be highly specific about your target audiences. This may require having someone in your community who's familiar with Facebook advertising, but that is always a possibility. Again, with your website, make sure you're keeping it relevant, keep it up to date, make sure you're talking about COVID-19 on there, talking about the need, have some sort of way to let people know you need and are accepting donations. Like we said earlier, that could be from the most advanced technology to just a thing saying, please contact us if you want to donate, or let us know and we'll contact you. And like we talked about a little bit earlier, so hosting virtual events, talks, or webinars like we're doing now. Keep your community engaged. Put a video out on Facebook, whatever that looks like. Just communicating is so important. So whatever it is, whatever your budget, just make sure that you're regularly communicating with your community. And that goes from mosques all the way up to like the largest nonprofit organizations. And finally, I just want to talk about the importance of asking your community to help you fundraise. So the last person who spoke a little bit about this, but it's not just on you. There are people in your communities who want to help you fundraise as well. So they want to donate themselves, but they also want to help spread the word. So think about who your most engaged donors or volunteers, your champions are, whether it's your board or leading volunteers, key donors, or just members of your community who are really passionate about what you do. And ask them if they would consider helping you spread the word, sharing your social media campaign, making their own posts, reaching out to their own communities. You know, they could ask their family or friends. They could do some third-party peer-to-peer fundraising in lieu of gifts on their birthdays or anniversaries over Ramadan. Ask for donations instead. And just remember that people want to help. They want to find something. So take advantage of, that sounds terrible, but take advantage of that. People want to help. Ask them to help. Otherwise, they won't know that you need help. And yeah, like I said earlier, don't miss out on the opportunity for those of you that are Muslim organizations or mosques to execute a digital campaign, whether simple or complicated. It can be as simple as you need it to be over Ramadan. Just, you know, this is the time, like Nergis said at the beginning. It can just be a single post, or it can be a full-fledged campaign with a certain amount attached to it. Just reach out to your community, let people know what you need. So then just in summary, to summarize sort of what we've talked about, and then we can get to any other questions everybody has. So what we've talked about, it's like the key things: appeal to your audience's emotional connection to your cause. And, you know, that emotional connection may not be immediately obvious, like we talked about a little bit. In the case of education, it's values, there is an emotional connection there. I think actually that example of educating future Muslim leaders is really powerful. It's the next generation. It's strengthening the community. That's speaking to somebody's values, and those have a connection to their empathy and their sort of emotional landscape, what's important to them. Leverage the power of storytelling, the psychology of giving, using some of those keywords we talked about. Be as specific as you can be, even if that's just your organization in general needs funds. It's why is it important for this organization to continue on and offering the specific services and programs that you do. Demonstrate gratitude, say thank you, let people know that you value their support. Don't be afraid, we've talked about this a lot, don't be afraid to ask for donations. People want to help, we're all in this together. And finally, just think about your different audiences, needs and expectations of your different audiences, whether you have people of high net worth or very low capacity, older or younger. Are there ways you can adjust your communications to speak specifically to them, make it as personal as possible wherever possible? So that's sort of the end of my presentation. But are there any more questions about any aspect of what I've talked about today?
Emily, I just want to make a small comment about that fundraising platforms we spoke about.
Yeah.
That is that crowdfunding platforms, they launch good, from my experience. It only reaches out to a certain group of Muslim donors. So what has happened recently is that although started to support a lot of grassroots movements and small organizations, now all the largest organizations have taken over, and sometimes they have multiple appeals going on. Because of the popularity, the grassroots fundings are being overshadowed by these large appeals. So that is one thing. So if you are going to do a crowdfunding, I would recommend go with that launch good, because it appeals to only the Muslim community. At the same time, go to that GoFundMe, Kickstarter campaign. The same, you can use both, because in that you are reaching out to a larger demographics, not only Muslims. Other people will also know, as Emily said, we are all in this together. So you have you are actually showcasing what is the need out there in the Muslim community. So I would suggest launch good, a Muslim specific crowdfunding platform, as well as another one or two.
That's a really great point, because actually, and a lot of people may not know that sites like you said, Arshad, GoFundMe and Kickstarter, it's not just those pages, and I think you can select it to be private, but those pages are typically available to anybody. You know, people might be searching for, are there Muslim related causes I can support, or mosques? Like, people can search for different causes to support on those platforms. They could stumble across yours and decide this is exactly what I want to support. So it does reach a much broader community. And, you know, the more you put it out there, the more it'll be shared, the more people will view it. So that's a great point. Thank you. Yeah. Don't be afraid to have multiple platforms where you're fundraising for the same thing and just intaking from different platforms. That's a great point.
Okay, we do have a question here. Can you provide an example of an educational institution's fundraising campaign in post-COVID world that is very successful? Do you have anything?
Yeah, so okay, so I can think of, I'm thinking of Centennial, which is a client of mine, and I haven't seen, so they're just working on a plan now for a post-COVID appeal. So hopefully this will apply in some way, but so they were originally going to do a spring appeal, and this is really sad that it couldn't go through, but it was going to be, one of their professors was on the Ukrainian Airlines flight from Tehran that was brought down, and he died with his family. So they were going to do a spring appeal to create a scholarship in his honor and memory. So it was all ready to go, and then COVID hit. So it was put on hold. So now, but now the situation that they're in at Centennial College is it's a Toronto community college. They have a huge international student body, but international, and that brings in a huge amount of their funding and their revenue with international student fees. But now they're in a really challenging situation where international students will not be able to attend, likely not be able to attend, at least through this, they've had to go home, they won't be able to come back. Just there's so much at stake. So they are putting together, again, a special appeal. What seems to be the best practice right now is putting together a special fund, a special appeal of saying, so it's sort of saying, and I haven't seen they're still working on the specifics of what it'll look like, and I'll be sort of working on that with them. But the direction I would imagine it going in is we have all these very unique, unprecedented circumstances that have suddenly, like we've said before, put sort of our current financial situation at risk. We want to be able to offer the best, educational experiences as we possibly can to our students, not just now, but going forward. We don't want to decrease the quality of our programs and services. So all of these types of things, we want to, a lot of people are saying in education, we need funding for the technology to offer our courses online, to sort of innovate and think differently about how we're reaching our students. So those are a lot of the messages that it's really thinking about, I guess, not just what do you need now to survive, but what do you need to be able to continue to offer education to your students in this time when you have to think differently. So funding that will allow you to innovate, to think differently, to survive in a really challenging time. So it's everything else has to be sort of set aside. People expect the COVID communications right now. We need to sort of think about, what are some of those specific needs that will help you to thrive over the next coming months. We don't know how long, I guess that's another thing for education specifically. We don't know how long this will last. This could go into the next school year. How can we set ourselves up for the best success? And we need our donors to help make that happen. Does that help?
So Kelowna, does that help you? Okay, I'll wait for her. Yes, she said a bit. All right, so Lama has another question. What would be a good strategy to appeal to a larger number of donors in terms of an amount? I was thinking, what is better to ask, $1,000 versus 500 versus 100?
That's a really good question. So there are a number of different ways. So if you are putting out, okay, so if you are a more sophisticated shop with like all the technology in the world, you could segment your list and send out different amounts for different donors. But I would say that to sort of think about, if you have the data on the sort of range that your donors tend to give, I would almost offer a range. I would say, you can either stick with something simple like a gift in the amount of like, $50 would do this, $100 would do this. That's an effective way if you're unsure, is just laying out a range so that everyone can see themselves within that range. It could even be, you could say every dollar counts, but at $25, you could help contribute to this program, or at $250. So providing a little range. Otherwise, I would say don't put an amount. I would say we would be so grateful if you would consider giving in any amount you're able. And that leaves it up to them. Often, so this is an interesting sort of point, like from the British Museum in London, they do not, you don't have to purchase a ticket, it's all donation. They they stopped putting a donation amount, the suggested donation amount. You don't have to pay it all to go in there. It's an optional donation. When they stopped putting a donation amount, they found that the average donation increased a lot. So it increased from like $10 to like $20 or $30 per donation. So people will give what they can. So I would say either a range or no figure at all. Just say give, what you're able to, and remembering that every dollar counts. So I think you'll be surprised. People that are able to will give generously.
Okay, great. I don't think we have more questions, and I did want to let everybody know that tomorrow, inshallah, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, again, we have Imam Irshad's training, which is donor engagement, why stewardship is the most crucial step in the fundraising cycle. So inshallah, I hope that all of you would come on a little bit earlier, and so we could just get started right away on time. And thank you so much, Emily, for everything, for the great presentation. And I do hope that it has answered a lot of questions for everyone. And yeah, if
Thank you. It's been really great. Thank you for all the great conversation. And my contact information is in the PowerPoint. So if you have any questions at all, please feel free to get in touch anytime, anybody. It's great to talk to you all.
So yes, I will be sharing her PowerPoint along with this video, recording of this video as well in a couple of days. Please keep an eye out for that. And yes, please go on the Sound Vision website to see the future trainings and webinars that are coming up. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, just a quick note. Usually the communication, today's one and tomorrow's the stewardship, has some overlapping. And I really wanted to get Lori, who is going to do the Christian churches tomorrow, next week, to do it tomorrow, so that there's no overlapping. But unfortunately, you know that tomorrow's Easter, so she's not available. So what I'm going to do in my tomorrow's presentation is two things. One is that to make it a lot of interactive way to get some lot of thoughts. And I'm going to share a lot of examples and get your feedback. And the same time, the second point is that I'm also, inshallah, going to help you build a plan, like going into Ramadan. So actual real plan, what are the things you can do, and then how you can move forward before going into Ramadan, inshallah. Looking forward to tomorrow.
That's great. And Hina has a quick question as well. So yes, Hina.
I just have a quick question. So we had a fundraiser on March 7th, actual fundraiser, and then everything, everything went nuts after that. So we never got to send out the pictures of the fundraiser. We had some really powerful moments. There was a photograph of like leadership all together, and we gave an award, a Justice Award. And I kept thinking that this is just insensitive to send it out, especially as schools were being locked down and all of that. So I'm thinking now, but I do want to thank our donors, of course, and some of them have asked for photos. How prudent would it be to send some of those highlights, a throwback to the good times, and just thank them and remind them that and these were people who donated or pledged to donate. We didn't meet our goal at that time. We were still a little short. So what would your suggestion be for that?
I think now is the perfect time. I think, I would have, in the first couple of weeks after this all happened, I would have said no. It would, doing anything aside from talking about how shocked we all were would have seemed totally insensitive and inappropriate, and everything got put on hold. But I think now, a number of weeks have passed. People are looking back on, remember the good old days. Remember what life was like. I have started to see some communications come out, and I've been working on some communications now that are looking back on what happened just before this happened. I think people are very understanding. I would say, I would acknowledge up front, we're so sorry for the delay in sending you these photos and this update. As you know, we had this completely unexpected disruption of COVID, but while we're all sort of going through these difficult times, we wanted to share these photos and this update from this event that we held just before this all happened. And we hope that you'll, join us in remembering what a great day it was, what a great event it was. So I would definitely acknowledge the COVID situation in that communication, and just say that yeah, please join us in remembering and reflecting. And if you do want to continue to support this cause, here's a link, however that looks. So I would say that now is a great time to start getting those communications out there that were put on hold. People want to talk about things other than COVID as well, so it's a nice reminder too of what else is going on out there and what other needs there are other than the sudden crisis we found ourselves in. So I say go for it. Yeah.
All right, inshallah, we'll see everybody tomorrow. And Saliha would be the one moderating this. So Imam Irshad, we will see you tomorrow with her. And take care, everybody. Have a great Saturday.
Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Welcome.